So today we are going to be talking about carbohydrates, digestion, digestion of carbohydrates. First of all, what is carbohydrates? Carbohydrates simply means sugars. Sugars has three basic properties. Number one, sugars, they are crystalline. Two, sugars are soluble. Three, sugars are sweet to taste. Okay, so with us knowing these three basic properties of sugar, then carbohydrate being sugar, for it to be digested, it needs to be, let's say, chewed. After that, the next thing is going to be you swallow. But first, carbohydrates, unlike other food, its digestion starts in the mouth whenever it comes in contact with the saliva, which is secreted from the salivary gland. Then this saliva contains what we refer to as the alpha salivary amylase, otherwise referred to as thiolane. What does this saliva do to carbohydrates? Let's take, for instance, we take a food containing starch, which is a polymer of glucose, polymer of sugars. That food containing starch will be broken down within some minutes or some seconds, let's say, into what we refer to as maltose. Goes down through the esophagus. Remember, we take starch, which is carbohydrates. Through the esophagus, what is going to happen? You're going to come to the reservoir, which is the stomach. Within the stomach, there are three major things that is seen in the stomach, which are renin and pepsin. Then this HCl is the one that helps to reduce the pH inside this stomach. What happens in the stomach? Unbeknownst, these enzymes present within the stomach are in form of their inactive form, which are referred to as zymogens. Inactive form of enzymes are referred to as zymogens. Then if you are to relate it to pepsin, you'll be having pepsinogen. What will happen? The HCl is going to go to this pepsinogen and activate it into pepsin. How does it do that? By cleaving some amino acids there, since they are enzymes. Enzymes are protein, remember. Then within the stomach, nothing like carbohydrate digestion is occurring due to its acidic pH, and then it lacks the enzyme for what? For carbohydrate digestion. Then it goes down from the stomach. Then after the stomach, the next part of the GIT is the small intestine. The small intestine is divided into three major parts. From proximal to distal, we have the duodenum, we have the jejunum, we have the ileum. Then the duodenum is this one that is shaped like a C. This duodenum now, you can see the presence of pancreas going within. Then this is the spleen. So the first part being the duodenum, the pancreas is going within the duodenum. Duodenum has dots, which are talk about the accessory dots, talk about the main dots. What is this dot for? The dot is for release of its contents into the duodenum. Then, since it has dots, therefore the pancreas has two main functions. It has an exocrine function and endocrine function. Know that. Then the pancreas itself, for carbohydrate digestion, it will release a stronger amylase, which is alpha pancreatic amylase. Have you wondered why it is called alpha? It is called alpha because within carbohydrates or sugars, there is what we refer to as bonds, which the one present in carbohydrates are glycosidic bond. This glycosidic bond can come in the form of alpha and what? Beta. So whenever we hear alpha, alpha means that it is breaking alpha glycosidic bonds. Okay. Then this alpha pancreatic amylase is way more stronger compared to the first amylase, which is alpha salivary amylase, the one present in the saliva. Then what will it do? We're going to cleave the starch to give us three major structures. Number one, we talk about our maltose. We talk about alpha limit dextrin. Then finally, we talk about one more thing, which is maltose triose. These are the three major things that we are going to be having when the alpha pancreatic amylase acts on the remaining starch. We are going to produce these three major things. The next part is duodenum. These three things, the main product of digestion is going to go into the duodenum. Within the duodenum, there are what we refer to as brush border enzymes. Why are they called brush border enzymes? They are called brush border enzymes because they are located within the, let's say, superior border of the duodenum. Remember, the typical feature of the duodenum, typical feature of this small intestine is that they're made up of all those finger-like structures which are villi, which increases surface area for digestion in the intestine. Then the duodenum I say that there is presence of broad order enzymes and the superior order of it. These broad order enzymes, at times, we refer to them to be disaccharide bases. Why are they called disaccharide bases? They cleave disaccharides. Examples of these disaccharide bases, we can talk about our maltase. Maltase is going to act on maltose to produce two molecules of glucose. We have sucrase. Sucrase is going to act on sucrose to produce glucose and the fructose. We have lactase. Lactase is going to act on lactose to produce galactose plus glucose. So from this thing I did here, and so on and so forth, from this thing I did here, you see glucose, you see fructose, you see galactose. These are the three major monosaccharides. The list of them are three number: glucose, fructose, and galactose. From the digestion, you see that it's these three that your intestine can do what? Easily absorb. The next phase is absorption, going towards the ileum. Then the reason why this absorption is possible within here is because of presence of what we refer to as glucose transporters. What does these glucose transporters do? They help to carry glucose from the outside within the bloodstream to inside of the cell for them to be either be utilized or for them to be stored. Then remember, whenever we are done eating, our blood sugar increases, and that increase is what we refer to as what? Hyperglycemia. Increased amount of glucose in your blood. Then these blood transporters, GLUT 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll be talking about GLUT 2, GLUT 4. GLUT 4 mainly present in fats. Then talk about your liver, talk about your skeletal muscles. GLUT 2 present in your liver, and so on and so forth. Then we are going to go in details later when we enter the pathways. Then with all these that we said, remember we started digestion from the mouth. It did not occur in the stomach. It went through the intestine, duodenum, digestion occurred because of the presence of the pancreas. Then finally it was absorbed. Then with that, I think you actually made sense. A lot of sense. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.